Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Thank you for tuning back in to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? Or if you're new here, thanks for giving us a try. This week I am covering the Giggling Granny, aka Nannie Doss, who was a sweet, older, unassuming, jovial, grandmother-looking woman who was an active serial killer for decades, and she is said to be responsible for at least 10 deaths. Nannie was born one of 5 siblings. She was born Nancy Agnes Hazel on November 4th, 1905, in Blue Mountain, Alabama. This was a really small rural town that back in 1910 only had a little over 500 people living there. It has since been absorbed into Anniston, Alabama. I'm just going to call her Nannie the whole way through because she gained that nickname when she was around like 5-ish, but to not confuse you or myself, she's just Nannie now. So Nannie was born to parents Louisa, or Lou, Holder, and James Hazel. James, her father, originally worked on the railroads and eventually took over the family farm. He was described as controlling, and some say to the point of abusive, to his wife and 5 children. Nannie and her mother really despised this controlling patriarch of the family. He would keep his children out of school a lot, forcing the children to instead work on the farm or do chores around the house. James ruled the household with an iron fist. And after the 6th grade, Nannie stopped going to school entirely, which obviously academically stunted her. Nannie and the other children barely left the farm. But it's said that when she was 7 years old, she, along with her family, took a trip to visit extended family, which was a rarity for them. And I guess during this trip, the train stopped short and Nannie ended up hitting her head on a metal bar in front of her. There is another version that she banged her head when a buggy crashed or overturned. Whichever version is true, if any, it's said that Nannie banged her head and was knocked out, which, if you follow true crime, seems to be a reoccurring factor in many cases, head trauma. The head injury caused lasting effects for Nannie, excruciating headaches, blackouts, depression, and later she blames what she did on this head trauma. Nannie and her sisters were not allowed to wear makeup or nice clothing. Her father said that this would cause his daughters to get sexually abused, controlling how they dressed, how they looked. Although Nannie later did say that she was sexually abused multiple times when she was a child, seemingly from family members. I'm assuming families that she went to go to visit, if this is true. And when she told her father, he was like, "Oh, no, you weren't." Just like a brush it under the rug type thing. Which is horrific if this did happen, but Nannie wasn't always truthful, so I don't know how to feel on that. But Nannie not being allowed to go to school or social events or any parties, she was socially stunted as well. She would spend a lot of her time trying to find her own escape. She would read romance magazines, dreaming of escaping her sheltered life on the farm to find her own happily ever after. And at 16 years old, Nannie, who was now permitted to work outside of the farm at a linen factory, which was located in Anniston, Alabama, there she met Charlie Braggs. The two only dated for about 4 months, and Nannie's father was asked for permission for the two to wed, and surprisingly he approved. Maybe because he saw this as one less mouth to feed? But either way, Nannie was free. They had a small ceremony, and Nannie moved in with her new husband. But her freedom didn't last long. Her new husband's widowed mother insisted that she was going to live with Nannie and Charlie. So Nannie's new mother-in-law moved on in, and she may have actually been more controlling than her own father. She would control the house, how to clean, what to cook. Nannie said that she wouldn't even let her own mother spend the night. And if there was something Nannie wanted to do with her husband, her mother-in-law would take a spell. Like, oh, I'm sick. Can you stay and care for me? So Nannie again was stuck in the house, a house that was ruled by Charlie's mother. Maybe because she was always stuck in the house, Nannie ended up having 4 daughters with her new husband, Charlie. She was pregnant like one after another from 1923 to 1927. 22 at the time, now having 4 children. She's stressed out. She's stuck in the house. She has a husband who's not hands-on with the children. And he was disappearing for days at a time. He's being unfaithful. And Nannie's stuck in the house with the mother-in-law who's like ruling the house. So Nannie started smoking more, drinking more, leaning on these vices to cope with her unhappiness. And then she started visiting local bars, seeking male companionship. It was just a marriage of 2 unhappy people being unfaithful. So one day in 1927, after Nannie cooked and fed her children breakfast, Nannie's 2 middle children just died. The children that were fine when Charlie left in the morning were both dead. So the town doctor checked the children out, and he ruled it as a food poisoning, which wasn't that uncommon for food to spoil or go bad back then, improperly refrigerated or improperly cooled or cross-contamination, whatever. And the town rallied together, showing Nannie sympathy, a husband that disappeared for days on end, and now Nannie lost her 2 middle children. Like, that's terrible. But Charlie didn't share the town's sympathy. He was side-eyeing his wife, and he stopped eating any food that Nannie prepared. He suspected Nannie of poisoning his 2 daughters. One night, in the middle of the night, Charlie took his eldest daughter, Melvina, and just bounced. But for some reason, he left his newborn, Florine, and his own mother in Nannie's care. Not long after that, Nannie's mother-in-law died. And then by 1928, so a year after he left, Charlie came back with their daughter, Melvina, and another woman, a divorcee. So it was pretty much clear to Nannie that their marriage was over. Like moving in a new woman with your current wife. So Charlie and Nannie divorced, and Charlie later said it was because he was afraid of Nannie, which doesn't quite explain why you'd leave your infant and your mother in her care, though. But what do I know? So Nannie moved back with her parents, bringing her 2 surviving daughters, and there she got a job at a cotton mill to support them. In 1929, this was a year after her divorce, Nannie met Robert, as people called him Frank, Harrelson. He was husband number 2. They met through the Lonely Hearts column, which was the equivalent of online dating now. It was a section in the newspaper where people could place personal ads looking for love. Back then, a lot of people lived in really rural areas. I hate that word, rural. And they had limited people in the area to choose from, so it allowed for your dating pool to grow significantly. Frank would send Nannie romantic letters, and Nannie would respond with risque letters and photos back, which was scandalous for a woman to do back then. They seemed to have a connection. Nannie, along with her children, Melvina and Florina, moved to Jacksonville to start this new blended family. The happiness didn't last long. Nannie soon learned that Frank was an alcoholic, and he would frequently be in trouble with the law with bar fights. He had a record of assault, and he was abusive to Nannie. Yet somehow, their marriage lasted 16 years. During this time, Nannie's own daughters grew up, and her eldest daughter, Melvina, had a baby of her own in 1943. 2 years later, Melvina had another baby, making Nannie a grandmother for a second time. When the new baby was born, Nannie went to go visit her second grandbaby in the hospital, and the baby just died. Which, I mean, infant mortality was a lot higher back then. But Melvina thought that she saw her mother use a hat pin to stick it in the baby's head. But the more she thought about it, she chalked it up to being groggy from just giving birth. But later on, Others do remember walking in and seeing Nannie fidgeting with a hat pin in her hand. But they still didn't put two and two together. So Melvina and her husband's marriage ended up falling apart after losing a child, which that's not that uncommon. And eventually Melvina started dating again. She met this soldier who she was crazy about, but Nannie did not care for. And one night in July of 1945, a few months after her first grandchild had died, Nannie and her daughter Melvina had this blowout over dating this soldier that she did not care for, and Nannie ended up watching her 2-year-old grandson. While she was watching her grandson, he died. It was later determined to be death from asphyxia from unknown causes, and then Nannie collected the life insurance money, $500, on a policy that she had on her grandson, which seems kind of weird, but it wasn't that uncommon for parents to take out life insurance policies on infants. It was a little strange because it was her grandmother, but Nannie did handle a lot of the finances in the family. So in that same year, also in 1945, this was over 16 years now that Nannie and Frank had been married. Frank went out drinking with some of his buddies one night who just got back from World War II. And this is something Nannie claims, but some people do question it. She claims that her husband sexually assaulted her that night. And back then, sexually assaulting your wife wasn't a thing. If you were married, it was implied consent. So Nannie says that she dealt with the problem like in her own way. And the next night, Nannie claims that she mixed in some rat poisoning in Frank's bootleg corn whiskey, knowing that he would drink some. And after he drank some, he was dead within a week. So now Nannie, alone again, without a husband, she went back to the Lonely Hearts column. There she met Artie Lanning. They married 3 days after meeting in person. And then Nannie moved to North Carolina with Artie. And in this marriage, Nannie would either be a perfect housewife, cooking and cleaning, taking care of her husband, or she would just leave for months at a time, not telling her husband where she was going. Artie was described as a womanizer who frequently sought out sex workers, and he was also an alcoholic. One time while Nannie was home, she cooked her husband a meal, added some rat poisoning, and Artie died from what was thought to be heart failure at the time because he was a big drinker, and it was said that in that area a flu was passing through, so there was no autopsy done. Again, the people of the town felt terrible for poor Nannie because remember, this is a new town. They knew her as a respectable, church-going woman, and Artie was like a cheating, no-good husband. Nannie just ate up the sympathy. Nannie learned after her husband had passed, well, she killed him, that her late husband left his house to his sister and not to Nannie. So mysteriously, the house burnt down. And instead, the sister-in-law got a check, which Nannie just took and cashed. So now Nannie, without a house because it just burnt down, Nannie went to go stay with her late husband's mother. So her mother-in-law. And then her late husband's mother died in her sleep. Isn't that really bad luck, Nannie? So again, without a place to stay, Nannie went to go stay with her sister, Dovey. And when Nannie arrived at her sister's house, her sister became ill, bedridden, and then died. I want to say, how do people not putting this together, but it was so spread out in different areas. So Nannie, now without a husband, decided to switch it up. And instead of the Lonely Hearts column to search for her new man, she contacted the Diamond Circle Club, which was a dating service. She paid $15 to join, which was probably a pretty penny back then. There, she met Richard L. Morton. The two wed in 1952 in Emporia, Kansas. And unlike her other husbands, Richard did not have a drinking problem. But he was known to have affairs. And Nannie wasn't really feeling this marriage, so she put another ad in the Diamond Circle Club as she was planning to remove Richard so she could find her next husband. But before she could, in January 1953, Nannie's father died. So Nannie's mother ended up coming to stay with her and her new husband. And days after moving in, Nannie's mother complained of intestinal pain and died. 3 months later, in May of 1953, her husband died of arsenic-laced coffee. So now those two were out of the way. This lady is exhausting, isn't she? Now Nannie could get back to looking for that fairy tale, for her Prince Charming. So the next month after her husband died, in June of 1953, Nannie married the respectable Samuel Doss, which, if you know Nannie Doss, that's where she gets her last name from. Samuel Doss from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was a Nazarene minister who lost his whole family to a tornado in Arkansas. Finally, a man that did not drink, was not a womanizer, and was not abusive. But Nannie quickly learned that this man was not for her. His frugality and strictness with money was a lot. She couldn't even use a fan to sleep with. But worst of all, Nannie, who still enjoyed disappearing into romance books, magazines, that was her escape. She was shocked to find out that Samuel did not permit Nannie to read them. So Nannie was like, yeah, this is not for me. And she left Oklahoma and went back to Alabama. Samuel begged to have Nannie back, that he would not be as cheap, and to show how much he wanted her back, he took out 2 life insurance policies on himself, naming Nannie as the beneficiary, which, if he knew Nannie, that was a big mistake. Nannie was like, okay, if you insist. So she went back with Samuel, and to celebrate them getting back together, she made a prune cake with some arsenic. So Samuel had some cake. So now, September of 1953, 3 months after they were married, Samuel became ill and went to the hospital with excruciating stomach pains. The doctor said it appeared that he had a digestive tract infection, and he was discharged from the hospital on October 5th. To celebrate his discharge, Nannie cooked a nice meal with some coffee that had some arsenic in it. And then Samuel died. This was a week after being discharged from the hospital. Nannie collected the 2 life insurance policies on him. This whole thing didn't sit right with Samuel's doctor, because he found this strange how quickly Samuel had regressed and died, and he wanted to order an autopsy. But to do this, he needed Nannie's permission. And he, tried to sway her, saying, to do this, we can try and find the cause and to try to save others from getting whatever sickness this was. And Nannie agreed. She was like, sure. And this would allow the husband she poisoned to get an autopsy. The autopsy showed arsenic in his system. And as his doctor put it, it was enough arsenic to kill 20 men. Which is such a weird move on Nannie's part. Did she think she was outsmarting them, or did she want to get caught? Or was she just so focused on finding a new husband she wasn't even thinking? But after the findings came back from the autopsy, Nannie was arrested. And while she was being questioned about Samuel Doss's murder, like during the interview portion of it, Nannie was smiling, flirting, giggling when talking about the poisoning. Her giggling during the interrogation led to her nickname, the Giggling Granny. While she was being questioned, Nannie was more concerned about when she could get her romance magazines back. And the officers, smart guys, used the magazines as leverage for her confession. So she was like, yeah, I did it. Now can I get back to reading? Doss admitted to killing Samuel because he wouldn't let her watch her favorite TV show. Nannie later did confess to murdering the other 3 husbands on top of Samuel, but denied killing any of her family members. They did exhume several ex-husbands and found that they did have rat poisoning or arsenic in their systems, as she said. Later, when they asked her, was it for the money? Nannie was like, no, it was because I was bored. Which, it may have been boredom, but she did get insurance payouts too, so 2 things can be true. And she did try to blame her actions on the head injury from when she was a child as the reason for her doing this. but I don't know. Nannie was tried by the state of Oklahoma, and the case focused on Samuel Doss as they had the most evidence on him. She was only tried for his murder. Nannie pled guilty on May 17th, 1955, and she was sentenced to life in prison. North Carolina, Kansas, and Alabama also charged her, but never had the chance to try her because, she was already spending life in prison. And she was facing the death penalty in Oklahoma. She was to be the first woman in the state to go to the electric chair. But 2 years later, a judge declared her insane, which commuted her sentence back to life in prison. The judge did say that he didn't seek the death penalty because she was a female and he didn't want to be associated with that precedent being set. While serving her sentence, Nannie was annoyed that they would not let her work in the kitchen, and she was only allowed to do laundry. She did many interviews while incarcerated. You can find a lot of them online. And she has this really weird, cheery, off-putting manner about her. I don't know how else to describe it. It's very strange, and some of her answers contradict other things that are said or that are documented, so that's what I mean about not really knowing what to believe with her. In 1965, Nannie, still incarcerated at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, died of leukemia on the 10th anniversary of her arrest. She's buried at Oak Hill Memorial Park in McAlester, Oklahoma, with a tombstone that reads, "Beloved Mother." Which, odd choice, but okay. It's still a mystery as to what caused her to kill, whether it was the head injury or the mental abuse she endured as a child, or Nannie's warped reality that lived in fairy tale books, money, or just eliminating people that impeded on her freedom. She does stand as a good reminder that not all serial killers look alike. Let me know what you guys think. Why do you think that she killed all these people? And would you eat prune cake? I'm one of those weird people that don't hate prunes, but prune cake just sounds horrific. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening. Hope everyone's staying warm. Till next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search "Ouch, was that a ghost?" If you need some schnazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching "Ouch, was that a ghost?" If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under "Ouch, was that a ghost?"
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.